The moment I heard the car door slam outside, my heart clenched. I hadn't expected anyone home. I thought I had the house to myself. For weeks, my husband, Daniel, had been telling me he was drowning in back-to-back work trips, apologizing profusely every time he packed his suitcase and left for the airport. "I hate leaving you like this," he'd say, his brown eyes full of what I thought was guilt. "Just a few more weeks and things will settle down." I believed him. God, I believed every word. But as I stood in the driveway of our suburban home that evening, a full day earlier than expected after my own business trip wrapped up early, something felt off. The windows were dark except for a faint glow from the living room. The house was supposed to be empty. Daniel had assured me he wouldn't be back until Friday night. Dragging my carry-on suitcase behind me, I walked slowly toward the front door. Each step felt heavier than the last. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door, half expecting to find nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe the lights were on because Daniel had forgotten to turn them off before leaving. The moment I pushed the door open, laughter drifted down the hallway like a dagger aimed at my chest. Feminine, light, and carefree, it was a sound I hadn't heard in our house in years. I froze. The suitcase handle slipped from my grasp and thudded against the hardwood floor. The laughter stopped. For a split second, silence filled the air, thick and suffocating. Then I heard footsteps, hurried, panicked. My heart raced as I stepped inside, forcing my feet to move, even though every part of me wanted to run. I followed the sound to the living room, and there they were. Daniel stood by the couch, his shirt untucked, his face pale as a sheet. A woman was scrambling to gather her things, her shoes, her purse, like a burglar caught in the act. She was beautiful, younger than me by at least 10 years, with wavy blonde hair cascading down her back. She looked like she belonged on the cover of some glossy magazine, not half-dressed in my living room. My living room. "Jessica," Daniel started, his voice shaky. "This isn't." "Don't," I hissed, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare say it's not what it looks like." Because it was exactly what it looked like. The way her lipstick smeared faintly on his collar, the rumpled throw pillows on the couch, the 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. This wasn't their first time. This was practiced. Comfortable. It hit me then, how many times had he done this in my house while I was away, trusting him, loving him? How long? My voice was a whisper, but the question cut through the room like a blade. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. I turned to her instead. "You. How long has this been going on?" She looked at Daniel, her blue eyes wide with fear, like she was expecting him to save her. He didn't. After a moment, she stammered, I didn't know he was married." A lie. Her eyes darted to my hand, where my wedding ring gleamed under the soft light. She knew. She knew exactly who I was, and she didn't care. I felt something inside me snap. All the years I had spent supporting Daniel, believing in him, sacrificing my own ambitions for the sake of our marriage, none of it mattered. None of it had stopped him from betraying me. "Get out," I said, my voice eerily calm. The woman hesitated, glancing at Daniel again. I said, "Get out." I screamed, the sound raw and guttural, shocking even myself. She grabbed her shoes and bolted, leaving the door swinging open behind her. That left me with him. Daniel stood there, frozen like a deer in headlights, as if he hadn't just destroyed our life together. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to demand answers, but instead I laughed. It was bitter, hollow, and entirely involuntary. "All those business trips," I said, shaking my head. "All those nights I stayed up worrying about you, wondering if you were eating, if you were getting enough sleep. And this is what you were doing?" "Jessica, I can explain." "Explain," I snapped. "Explain how you've been screwing some random woman in my house? On my couch. Don't waste your breath." He stepped toward me, but I held up my hand again, stopping him cold. I didn't want his excuses, his lies, his pathetic attempts to salvage whatever shred of decency he thought he still had. "Do you even love me?" I asked, my voice trembling. His silence was answer enough. That night I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I packed a bag, grabbed my car keys, and walked out the door without looking back. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I deserved better than this. Better than him. In the weeks that followed, I started putting my life back together. I filed for divorce, moved into a small apartment, and threw myself into my work. But the anger didn't go away. It simmered under the surface, growing stronger with every memory of his betrayal. One day I stumbled across his calendar, still synced to my phone. That's when the idea came to me. A way to hit him where it hurt. Daniel had a big conference coming up. One he'd been talking about for months. It was his chance to impress his bosses, to secure the promotion he'd been chasing for years. So I made a few calls. Reached out to an old friend who worked in PR. Together we created an anonymous dossier. Pictures of Daniel and his mistress, screenshots of flirtatious texts, and receipts from their hotel stays. The night before the conference, I emailed the dossier to his boss. I didn't wait for the fallout. I didn't need to. All I knew was that Daniel would finally understand what it felt like to lose everything. To watch the life he'd built crumble around him. And as I stood in my new apartment, sipping a glass of wine, I realized something. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't the naive, trusting woman who let herself be walked all over. I was stronger, fiercer, and I was free. Weeks turned into months, and life without Daniel slowly became my new normal. At first, there were moments when the loneliness hit me like a wave. I would sit on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty space where he used to sleep, and wonder how everything had gone so wrong. But those moments were fleeting. More often than not, I felt something else, a strange, unfamiliar sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. I redecorated the apartment, filling it with colors and textures I loved, not the muted tones Daniel always insisted on. I started running every morning, something he used to mock me for, claiming I was too ambitious about fitness. I joined a book club, met new people, and even reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen since Daniel and I got married. One of those friends, Erica, became my lifeline. She had been my college roommate, the kind of person who always knew how to make me laugh, even in the darkest moments. When I told her about what had happened, she didn't mince words. "Jessica, that man was a parasite," she said over drinks one Friday night. "You spent years bending over backward for him, and he didn't even have the decency to keep his lies out of your house. You're better off without him." She was right, of course, but it took time to believe it. I had spent so long tying my identity to Daniel, to our marriage, that I didn't know who I was without him. But as the weeks went by, I started to find her. The version of me that had been buried under years of compromise and self-doubt. One Saturday, while scrolling through my emails, I stumbled upon a message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "We need to talk." My stomach churned. Against my better judgment, I clicked on it. The email was from Daniel. "Jessica, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but I need to say this. I'm sorry for everything. Losing you has made me realize how badly I screwed up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life. If you're willing, I'd like to talk in person. No pressure, but please let me know." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to delete the email and block him forever. What right did he have to ask for anything from me after what he'd done? But another part of me, a smaller, more curious part, wondered what he thought he could possibly say to make this better. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Fine. One meeting. Public place. This Friday at 6 p.m. Don't be late." The days leading up to Friday were a whirlwind of emotions. I told myself I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it for closure. I needed to hear whatever excuses he had so I could finally let go of the last remnants of our marriage. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, a place we used to frequent when we were first dating. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel was already seated when I arrived, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His hair was slightly messy, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Jessica," he said, standing as I approached. "Thanks for coming." I sat down across from him, folding my hands in my lap. "You have 5 minutes. Say what you need to say." He nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know I hurt you. I know there's nothing I can say to undo what I did. But I need you to understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "That you were bored? That our life wasn't exciting enough for you? Spare me, Daniel. I've heard enough cliches to last a lifetime." "It wasn't about that," he said quickly, his voice pleading. "I was stupid and selfish, yes, but it wasn't because I didn't love you. I loved you, God, I still love you, but I felt trapped. Trapped. I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You felt trapped in the life I helped you build? The life I sacrificed for while you were out pretending to be someone else. He flinched but didn't deny it. I don't expect you to take me back. I just needed to tell you the truth. I'm in therapy now trying to figure out why I sabotaged the best thing in my life. You deserved better than me, Jessica. You still do. For a moment I just stared at him, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw my coffee in his face and storm out. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger over the past few months, felt oddly calm. You're right, I said finally. I did deserve better. And I still do. I'm glad you're in therapy, Daniel. I hope it helps you. But this doesn't change anything for me. You made your choices and I've made mine. He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I hope you find happiness, Jess. Truly. I already have, I said, standing up. And it has nothing to do with you. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I had been carrying the pain of his betrayal, letting it define me. But now, for the first time, I realized that I didn't need his apology, his explanations, or his regret. I was free to move forward, unburdened by the past. That night, I celebrated with Erica and a few friends. We toasted to new beginnings, to strength, and to the kind of love that doesn't require sacrifice or betrayal. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. And as I fell asleep in my cozy little apartment, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally home. Life continued to unfold in ways I hadn't anticipated, and every day seemed to bring a new layer of self-discovery. My mornings became sacred. A run through the park, the crisp air filling my lungs, followed by coffee at a small cafe I had discovered a few blocks from my apartment. The owner, a kind older man named Frank, started recognizing me after a couple of weeks. We'd chat briefly as he poured my usual latte, and it became part of my routine, a moment of grounding before the chaos of the workday. At work, I was thriving in ways I hadn't in years. Without the constant distraction of Daniel's needs and his endless emergencies, I found myself pouring my energy into projects that mattered. My boss noticed, and within a few months I was leading a team on a major campaign. It was exhilarating to feel appreciated, not for my sacrifices or my compromises, but for my talents and hard work. But it wasn't just work or routines that changed, it was me. Slowly, I started to push boundaries I hadn't dared to touch in years. I signed up for a photography class after work on Thursdays, something I had always wanted to try but never did because Daniel thought it was impractical. The first time I held a camera in my hands, really learning to frame a shot, I felt a spark of joy that was completely mine. One evening after class, as I walked home with my camera slung over my shoulder, I stopped by the park. The sky was a swirl of oranges and purples, and I couldn't resist capturing it. As I adjusted the lens, I heard a voice behind me. Beautiful shot, but you might want to try shifting your angle. Catch the reflection in the pond. I turned to see a man standing a few feet away, holding his own camera. He had an easy smile and a quiet confidence about him. His name was Adam, and as it turned out, he was also a photographer, though far more experienced than me. We ended up talking for hours that night, walking through the park and comparing shots. He gave me tips, but he never made me feel small for being a beginner. Adam was the first person in a long time who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be, and certainly not who I had been with Daniel. Our friendship grew quickly, and before long, he became a fixture in my life. He'd text me random photography challenges, like capturing the perfect shot of a stranger's smile, or finding beauty in an everyday object. Those challenges became my favorite part of the week. One rainy Saturday, Adam invited me to join him for a photography exhibit downtown. I almost said no. Even though I was growing, there was still a part of me that hesitated, that feared getting too close to someone new. But something about the way he asked, casual, no pressure, made me agree. The exhibit was stunning, filled with images that told stories more powerful than words. As we wandered through the gallery, Adam pointed out his favorite pieces, and I found myself drawn to his passion, the way he saw the world through a lens I had never considered before. By the end of the night, I realized I hadn't thought about Daniel once. It wasn't love at first sight or even second or third. It was something quieter, something that grew slowly and naturally, like a seed planted in rich soil. Adam and I didn't rush. We spent months just being friends, learning about each other in ways that felt effortless. He didn't push, didn't demand more than I was ready to give. One evening, as we sat on the floor of his apartment, editing photos from a weekend trip to the coast, he turned to me and said, "You know, you've got an incredible eye. You see details most people miss." I laughed. "You're just saying that because I'm your project." He shook his head, serious now.
No, Jessica.
"You're not a project. You're remarkable." Something in his tone stopped me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't the wild, reckless passion I had once thought love was supposed to be. It was steadier, warmer, like stepping into sunlight after a long, cold winter. As the months went by, Adam became more than a friend. He became my partner in every sense of the word. He celebrated my victories at work, encouraged me when I doubted myself, and never once made me feel like I had to dim my light to make him shine. With him, I was finally learning what it meant to be in a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. And yet, there were moments when the past crept in uninvited. One afternoon, while cleaning out a storage box, I found an old photo of Daniel and me on our wedding day. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him but for the woman I had been, the woman who believed so deeply in forever. I let myself feel it, then carefully placed the photo in the trash. That chapter of my life was over. But closure has a funny way of finding you when you least expect it. One evening, as Adam and I sat at a rooftop bar watching the city lights, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica, it's Daniel. I just wanted to say, thank you for everything. I'm in a better place now, and I hope you are too. You deserved the world. I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond, or if I even should. Finally, I typed a simple reply. "I wish you well." And that was it. The end of the story, not with a bang, but with the quiet closing of a door that had been left ajar for too long. As I put my phone down, Adam reached for my hand, his touch grounding me in the present. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes full of concern. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "It is now." Looking out over the city, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't turned out the way I expected, but it had turned out exactly as it needed to. I was no longer defined by the pain of my past or the mistakes of someone else. I was whole, strong, and ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of gratitude that I hadn't known before. It wasn't tied to a person or an event. It was simply for the life I was building, one small step at a time. Adam became a steady presence, but he never overshadowed the other parts of my life. I learned how to balance being in a relationship with maintaining my independence, something I hadn't known how to do with Daniel. Photography started as a hobby, but it grew into something more. Frank, the cafe owner, offered to hang a few of my prints on the wall. "Just to see how people respond," he said, shrugging like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. Seeing my work displayed, even in a small corner of the cafe, felt like validation. People started asking about the photos, and one day, a woman approached me while I was sipping my latte. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her phone. "Are you the one who took this?" She pointed to a picture I had taken of the park during a sunset, the colors bleeding together like watercolors. "Yes," I said, surprised. "It's beautiful," she said, smiling warmly. "Do you sell prints?" I blinked, caught off guard. I haven't, but I suppose I could." That conversation was the spark I needed. I set up a small online shop, nothing fancy, just a way for people to purchase prints if they wanted. To my astonishment, the orders trickled in slowly at first, then steadily. It wasn't a career change, but it was something that belonged entirely to me, something I could nurture and grow. Adam was my biggest cheerleader. He'd help me choose the best shots, offer gentle critiques, and even accompany me on trips to find new locations to photograph. One weekend, he surprised me with a road trip to a small coastal town. "I thought you might like to catch the sunrise over the water," he said, grinning as we pulled up to a quaint little bed and breakfast. We woke up before dawn, bundled in layers against the chill, and hiked to a rocky outcrop overlooking the ocean. As the first rays of light stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt something I hadn't in years: awe. Not just at the beauty of the moment, but at the realization that I was truly happy. The happiness wasn't fleeting or dependent on anyone else. It was rooted in the choices I had made, in the person I had become. I thought back to the woman I had been when I first discovered Daniel's betrayal, the pain, the anger, the sense of loss that had consumed me. I barely recognized her now. She had been stripped bare, broken. But from those broken pieces, something stronger had emerged. Not everything was perfect, of course. There were moments when doubt crept in. Whispers from the past that told me happiness wasn't meant to last. One night, as Adam and I sat on my balcony sharing a bottle of wine, I confessed my fears. What if this doesn't work out? I asked, staring down at the glass in my hands. What if I'm not meant to have something good? Adam leaned forward, his gaze steady and unwavering. Just, life isn't about guarantees. It's about showing up day after day and choosing to be all in, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. His words stuck with me. They weren't just about our relationship, they were about everything. My photography, my friendships, even the way I approached work. Slowly, I learned to lean into the uncertainty, to trust that I could handle whatever came next. As the seasons changed, so did my life in subtle, meaningful ways. Erica introduced me to a larger circle of friends, and soon our Friday night drinks became a regular gathering. I found myself surrounded by people who made me laugh until my sides hurt, who supported me without expecting anything in return. One of those friends, a woman named Lisa, ran a small art gallery downtown. She invited me to an exhibit one evening, and as we wandered through the space, she turned to me with a mischievous grin. "You know," she said, "we're looking for local artists for our next showcase. You should submit your work." I laughed, shaking my head. "I'm not an artist. I'm just someone with a camera." She raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think artists are? Someone with a brush? A chisel?" "Jess, your work is incredible. You have a gift and you should share it." Her words stayed with me long after the night ended. The idea of showcasing my work in a gallery felt absurd, almost laughable. But Lisa's confidence in me sparked something I hadn't realized I was missing: belief in myself. With Adam's encouragement, I submitted a portfolio. Weeks later, I received an email. My photographs had been accepted. The gallery showcase was set for the following month, and I spent every spare moment preparing. The night of the showcase was surreal. Friends, coworkers, and even strangers wandered through the gallery, pausing to admire my photographs. Hearing their reactions, how the images made them feel, what they saw in them, was more rewarding than I could have imagined. Toward the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, Adam found me standing near one of my favorite pieces. A shot of the park at sunrise, the one that had started it all. "You did it," he said, slipping an arm around my waist. "We did it," I corrected, smiling up at him. "No," he said softly. "This was all you." In that moment I realized he was right. This wasn't about Daniel or Adam or anyone else. This was about me. My strength, my resilience, my ability to create something beautiful out of the ashes of what had once been my life. As the gallery lights dimmed and the evening came to a close, I felt a sense of contentment that was deeper than anything I had ever known. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had built. And it was enough. The weeks following the gallery showcase were a whirlwind. I was approached by a few local magazines wanting to feature my work, which felt surreal. One editor described my photography as intimate yet universal, capturing moments that felt deeply personal while resonating with anyone who viewed them. I smiled when I read her words, but deep down I knew what she meant. My work was born from the rawest parts of me, the places that had been shattered and painstakingly rebuilt. It wasn't just photography. It was my story told in light and shadow. With the magazine features came more opportunities. A small boutique hotel downtown reached out, asking if I could create a series of prints for their guest rooms. It was the kind of project that I would have hesitated to take on a year ago, doubting my ability to deliver something professional. But now I said yes without hesitation. I spent weeks walking the city, capturing its quiet beauty, sunlight streaming through rain-soaked alleys, the play of reflections on skyscraper windows, the vibrant chaos of a bustling market. When the hotel unveiled the prints, I was invited to their grand opening. Seeing my work displayed in such a public space filled me with a sense of pride I couldn't put into words. Through it all, Adam remained my steady compass. He celebrated every victory as if it were his own, but he never let me rest on my laurels. "What's next?" he'd ask with a grin, nudging me to dream bigger. His belief in me was unwavering, but what made it even more meaningful was that he didn't define me by my successes or my failures. On days when I doubted myself, when the voice in my head whispered that I wasn't good enough, he was there to remind me that my worth wasn't tied to what I created. "You're enough just as you are," he'd say, and for the first time in my life I believed it. Our relationship deepened in ways that felt natural and unforced. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping gestures, just quiet moments of connection that built a foundation stronger than anything I'd known before. We spent weekends exploring the countryside, photographing old barns and winding rivers, and evenings curled up on the couch, laughing over the terrible movies we loved to hate. It was simple, easy, and exactly what I needed. But even in the midst of this new chapter, life had its complications. One afternoon, while sorting through old files on my computer, I stumbled across an email thread between Daniel and me from years ago. It was from the early days of our marriage, full of plans and dreams we had shared. For a moment I felt a pang of something, nostalgia maybe, or a faint echo of sadness. It wasn't about missing Daniel. It was about mourning the version of myself who had believed so deeply in forever. I let myself feel it for a moment, then closed the file and moved on. That was the difference now. I didn't get stuck in the past. I didn't let it define me. Instead, I used it as a reminder of how far I'd come. My past did resurface in unexpected ways, though. One evening, as I was leaving a local market, I spotted Daniel across the parking lot. He was standing with a woman I didn't recognize, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. They were laughing about something, completely unaware of my presence. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to feel. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. I thought about walking over, saying hello, but I realized I didn't need to. Whatever closure I had once craved, I had already found. Instead, I slipped into my car and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in years. Daniel was a chapter in my story, but he wasn't the whole book. I had moved on, and seeing him so clearly rooted in his own life only reaffirmed that. As my photography career grew, so did my confidence. I started speaking at workshops and conferences, sharing not just my technical knowledge, but the personal journey that had led me to this point. People often came up to me afterward, thanking me for my honesty, for showing them that it was possible to rebuild after heartbreak. Those moments meant more to me than any paycheck or publication. They reminded me why I had picked up a camera in the first place. Not just to capture beauty, but to find meaning in the messiness of life. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, Adam surprised me with a candlelit dinner on my balcony. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers he'd brought. As we clinked our glasses, he looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you are." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't look away. "I wouldn't be here without you," I said. He shook his head. "You'd be here no matter what. I just get to witness it." That night, as we sat under the stars, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, shaped by the choices I had made, and the people I had chosen to share it with. And that was more than enough. In the months that followed, I continued to push myself, both personally and professionally. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of visiting. Deserts, mountains, bustling cities, and each new experience left its mark on my work. My photographs began to reflect not just the beauty of the world around me, but the strength I had found within myself. They were a testament to the woman I had become, a woman who had faced betrayal and heartbreak and come out stronger on the other side. And as I stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean one crisp autumn morning, camera in hand, I felt a deep sense of peace. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the water, and I knew that this was just the beginning. Life would continue to throw its challenges my way, but I was ready for them. I was no longer afraid of falling, because I knew I could always find my way back to solid ground. And as I clicked the shutter, capturing the moment forever, I smiled, knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The years that followed felt like chapters in a story I never expected to write, but had grown to cherish. My photography evolved into a full-time career, something I hadn't dared to dream of back when my life was tethered to Daniel's ambitions. I opened my own studio in a renovated warehouse downtown, a space flooded with natural light, its walls lined with my favorite prints. It became a sanctuary, not just for me but for the clients who walked through its doors. Families, couples, artists, they came to me to capture moments that mattered, and every shoot reminded me of why I had fallen in love with photography in the first place. Adam was there every step of the way, though never in a way that overshadowed me. He celebrated my successes but didn't try to claim them as his own. His support was quiet yet unwavering, the kind of steady presence that felt like home. He had his own creative pursuits, a freelance career in design that often intertwined with mine. We collaborated on projects now and then, and it always amazed me how seamlessly our ideas meshed. It was a partnership in every sense of the word, equal, supportive, and rooted in respect. But life, as it always does, had its challenges. One winter my mother fell ill, and for a time it felt like the ground beneath me was shifting. She was my rock, the person who had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Watching her struggle was a kind of pain I hadn't anticipated, a reminder that life is fragile and fleeting. Adam was there through it all. He held my hand in hospital waiting rooms, cooked meals when I couldn't bring myself to eat, and listened when the weight of it all became too much. "We'll get through this," he said one night as we sat together on the couch, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. And somehow we did. My mother recovered slowly but surely, her resilience a reminder of the strength I had inherited from her. The experience changed me in ways I hadn't expected. It made me more intentional with my time, more present in the moments that mattered. I started saying no to projects that didn't align with my values, focusing instead on work that brought me joy and connection. I traveled less for photography and spent more time cultivating relationships with my family, my friends, and Adam. Life wasn't about chasing the next big thing anymore. It was about savoring what I already had. One evening, as Adam and I prepared dinner together in the tiny kitchen of my apartment, he turned to me with an uncharacteristically serious expression. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice soft yet steady. "Oh," I teased, though my heart skipped a beat. "That sounds ominous." He smiled, shaking his head. "Not ominous. Just important." He set down the knife he was holding and reached for my hands. "Jess, I love the life we've built together. I love you. And I want to keep building wherever that takes us." I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the air. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he continued, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice, "that I want us to take the next step, whatever that looks like for you, for us. No pressure, no timelines. Just think about it." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Not because I was uncertain, but because his words hit me so deeply. In a world that often felt rushed and demanding, he was offering me the gift of patience, of choice. "I don't need to think about it," I said finally, squeezing his hands. "I'm ready. Whatever comes next, I want it with you." The look in his eyes was all the confirmation I needed. We didn't rush into anything. There were no grand declarations or whirlwind decisions. Instead, we quietly began planning the next chapter of our lives together, one step at a time. We moved into a loft downtown, a space that reflected both our personalities, part cozy retreat, part creative workshop. The walls were lined with Adam's sketches and my photographs, a testament to the life we were building together. On weekends, we hosted friends for dinner, filling the space with laughter and warmth. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours, and that was enough. As time went on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. There was a time when I had thought my life was over, when Daniel's betrayal had felt like the end of everything I had known. But standing in the light of all I had created, I realized it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. A painful, messy, necessary beginning that had led me to a life fuller than I could have imagined. One day, as I prepared for a gallery opening featuring my latest collection, I found myself flipping through an old journal I had kept during the darkest days of my divorce. The pages were filled with heartbreak, anger, and self-doubt, emotions that felt like a distant memory now. I didn't recognize the woman who had written those words, but I felt a deep sense of gratitude for her. She had fought to find her way out of the darkness, to rebuild herself from the ground up. Without her, I wouldn't be here. That evening, as I stood in the gallery surrounded by friends, colleagues, and strangers admiring my work, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Adam stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my back, and I knew that this was the life I had always deserved. It wasn't perfect and it never would be, but it was real. It was mine. As the crowd began to disperse and the evening wound down, I found myself standing alone in front of one of my favorite pieces, a photograph of the ocean at sunrise, its colors vibrant and full of life. It was a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come, a testament to the beauty that could be found even in the midst of chaos. And as I gazed at the image, I smiled, knowing that the story wasn't over. There were still chapters to write, still moments to capture, still dreams to chase. But for now, I was exactly where I was meant to be. And that was enough. The final chapter of this story wasn't marked by a single grand event, but by the quiet culmination of everything that had come before. Life continued as it always does, with its ebbs and flows, its surprises and challenges. But through it all, there was a sense of steady contentment that I had never known before. Adam and I built a life that felt uniquely ours. We didn't rush into the traditional milestones that society seemed to expect. Instead, we chose what felt right for us, creating a partnership rooted in understanding and trust. Our days were filled with the ordinary magic of shared breakfasts, spontaneous adventures, and quiet evenings spent working on our respective projects. And though life was far from perfect, it was perfect for us. One summer afternoon, we found ourselves back at the park where we had first met, cameras slung over our shoulders. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the ground,